This is Center Studio, where we follow the flow of common sense. Israel now appears to be using overwhelming military force to attack Arab countries in the Middle East. Israel is demanding land in Syria for future use, causing shock. Today, let's take a look at Israel's recent strategy and the situation in the Middle East. Let's get right into it. On September 16th local time, Israel made a proposal to Syria. The proposal was to establish a buffer zone within Syrian territory. So how far does this go? It was about designating a demilitarized zone and a no-fly zone in southwestern Syria, stretching from Damascus, the capital of Syria, all the way to the Israeli border. Honestly, calling it a proposal is generous. It was just a demand. Israel's proposed demilitarized zone is split into 3 areas, each permitting different Syrian military armament levels. If you listen closely, something feels off. The Syrian military's armament changes, but Israel's military stays heavily armed. First, let's review Israel's demands. Syrian troops and heavy weapons are banned near the Israeli border. Only police forces for public order can be deployed. This demilitarized zone is also a no-fly zone barring Syrian aircraft. Additionally, Israel will demand an air corridor for its aircraft to fly directly to Iran via Syria. Israel wanted the airspace open to quickly reach Iran for airstrikes. Israel offered to withdraw troops from recently occupied Syrian territory if Syria agreed to their demands. Israel didn't offer a full withdrawal. They wanted to keep their Mount Hermon base, which could directly bomb Damascus, and leave the rest. The Syrian government was very reluctant, but they remained calm. Since the end of the civil war, Syria has shown a very friendly attitude toward the United States. And following the demands of the United States, Syria has stopped its reconciliation with Israel. Even after several weeks since receiving Israel's proposal, Syria still hasn't responded. It's understandable since Israel's demands are absurd and ignore Syria's sovereignty, making it hard for Syria to decide. Syria is reportedly preparing a counter-proposal to Israel's offer. The problem is that Syria is also in a difficult position. Currently, Syria is trying to normalize the country with support from the West, including the United States. Syria is pressured to accept some of Israel's demands. If Israel rejects these and launches airstrikes, Syria would face chaos and be left with limited options. Syria will discuss the proposal with Israel in London on September 18, and the United States is reportedly suspending its actions. Foreign news reports say progress has been made, but no agreement is near, so talks are expected to continue. Israel's recent actions can be called an extreme form of offensive defense. Although the international community criticizes Israel's policies as aggressive, Israelis see things very differently. The leadership and military view this hardline stance as essential for the nation's survival. Israel consistently sees its surroundings as full of threats. On Lebanon's northern border, Hezbollah still has missiles. In Gaza, Hamas militants hide weapons. And in Yemen, Iran-backed Houthi rebels test long-range attacks. Qatar is also cited as a base for Palestinian armed groups. Israel likely views the Middle East as a region under siege against them. That's when the Papo strategy emerged. The original phrase is "puck around and find out," and within Israel it's commonly understood as a straightforward warning that if you mess around, you'll get hurt. First of all, Israel is trying to show an aggressive stance, making it clear that whoever the opponent is, if they show any sign of danger, Israel will strike preemptively. Once a conflict begins, they are determined to see it through and ensure the other side pays. To support this strategy, Israel launched the Ophek-19 reconnaissance satellite in September. The satellite looking down from space records every movement beyond the border in real time, and the information collected this way is immediately delivered to Unit 9900 under the Military Intelligence Directorate. This unit specializes in image interpretation and geospatial analysis, detecting subtle changes in buildings or vehicle routes. Scenes that seem meaningless on the surface can instantly be turned into strike targets once they pass through their hands. The collected information is immediately used in operations by the Air Force and Special Forces. This explains why an area in southern Syria, living normally until recently, was suddenly bombed overnight. A seamless triangular system of intelligence, surveillance, and strike operates behind the scenes. Israel does not use this system simply as a means of retaliation. The approach of waiting for the enemy's attack and then responding has already been abandoned. Instead, the strategy has shifted to applying pressure and neutralizing the enemy even before they can gather their forces or deploy their weapons. For example, if Hezbollah appears to be building a missile base near the border, Israel strikes preemptively before it's operational. If Iran moves troops or weapons through Syria, they're hit with an airstrike as soon as detected by surveillance. This strategy stirs tension and fear among neighbors, supporting Israel's long-term goal to shift Middle East power in its favor. This reflects Israel's long-term strategy for regional dominance, not just a reaction to immediate threats. Arab and Islamic nations in the Middle East held an emergency summit on September 15, unanimously condemning Israel's airstrike on Qatar. At the summit, a joint statement urged all countries to take legal steps to stop Israel's actions against Palestinian civilians. They proposed reviewing diplomatic and economic relations with Israel and initiating legal procedures as countermeasures. They also stated that efforts should be coordinated to suspend Israel's United Nations membership, officially beginning pressure and sanctions against Israel. Even Egypt and Jordan, despite diplomatic ties with Israel, jointly criticized it. Turkey stated Israel's lawlessness is now unprecedented. The Arab world is rapidly uniting against Israel as international pressure on Israel increases. The vote held at the United Nations General Assembly on September 10 clearly showed this trend. The resolution supporting Palestine passed with 142 countries in favor and only 10, including Israel and the United States, opposing. In effect, the vast majority of the international community sided with Palestine, leaving Israel in a small, isolated camp. Just the day before, on the 11th, the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting and strongly condemned the airstrike on Doha. This also shows that the perception is spreading that Israel's military actions have gone beyond the scope of simple self-defense. In other words, as military clashes continue, Israel is bringing political isolation upon itself on the international stage. It's hard to claim this airstrike was purely for military reasons. Political motives are clearly involved. Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving leader, but also one of its most controversial figures. He is currently on trial for corruption, while coalition government conflicts persist. As this keeps happening, his leadership is starting to show cracks. Polls show his approval ratings changing, while weekly anti-government protests occur in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other cities. He always makes similar choices when his political base is shaken. When a crisis arises, he creates a bigger one to distract the public, always using security as his strategy. As the war with Hamas continues and Gaza bombings intensify, the public focuses more on security threats than on corruption or judicial risks. When a real external enemy appears, internal disputes fade, at least for a while, but this time was different. The international community pushed for a ceasefire faster and more forcefully than expected. With growing opposition to indiscriminate airstrikes on Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu sought a new solution. The method he chose was to widen the front. He attacked Syria, threatened Lebanon, and reached Qatar and Yemen, broadening the conflict. This pattern is well known even within Israel. When domestic pressure rises, he exaggerates external threats to unite supporters, a crisis diversion strategy. It's no exaggeration to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu's long-term rule has been possible because of the repeated use of this strategy, but this time, the situation is different. International pressure is at an all-time high, and with Arab and Islamic countries rapidly uniting against Israel, his backlash will be much stronger. Many analysts say his current aggressive actions are not just military operations, but desperate attempts to survive politically. Israel is taking an unusual action. The Middle East appears to be growing more turbulent, and with the region's response becoming clearer, we'll have to wait and see what unfolds. What are your thoughts on the current situation? Share in the comments. Thanks for watching.